He thought he was making a waitress the punchline of the night, but before the cards stopped falling, he would become the story everyone in that casino would remember. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments below. And if you believe respect should never depend on a person's job title, make sure to like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that appearances can be deceiving. Now, back to Emily Carter. The Grand Monarch Casino glowed beneath the Las Vegas skyline like a palace of gold and glass. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors while the steady melody of slot machines blended with the quiet conversations of wealthy guests. On the exclusive second level, hidden behind velvet ropes and frosted glass doors, sat the casino's legendary VIP poker room. This was where celebrities, investors, professional athletes, and elite poker players gathered to test their skills and their egos. At the center table sat Jason Reed, one of the most recognizable poker professionals in America. At 44, he had built a reputation not only for winning millions of dollars but for making sure everyone knew it. His expensive charcoal suit fit perfectly. His silver watch caught the light every time he stacked another tower of chips. Around him sat Marcus Kane, Trevor Scott, and Ethan Brooks, three other professional players who had spent years competing on television tournaments and high-stakes events across the country. Tonight had been particularly good for them. The chips kept moving their way, and with every victory their confidence grew louder. Meanwhile, moving quietly through the room was Emily Carter. At 38, she worked evening shifts as a cocktail waitress. Her dark blonde hair was tied neatly behind her head, and her simple uniform blended into the background of the luxurious room. Most guests barely noticed her. She moved efficiently from table to table carrying drinks, clearing glasses, and offering polite smiles. Unlike the players, she never demanded attention. She never inserted herself into conversations. She simply did her job. But while the players focused on cards and money, Emily noticed everything. She noticed which players tapped their fingers when nervous. Which players stared too long at strong hands. Which players became reckless after a big win. Years of working in the casino had taught her that people often revealed more than they intended. Across the room, Jason leaned back in his chair after dragging another massive pot. The players around him laughed as he tossed a few chips into the center of the table. Then his eyes landed on Emily as she placed a fresh glass beside one of the guests. A slow grin appeared on his face. The kind of grin that usually meant trouble for someone else. Marcus followed his gaze and chuckled. Trevor looked over his shoulder. Ethan smirked. Within seconds, all four men were staring at the quiet waitress. Emily felt their attention immediately, but continued arranging glasses without reacting. Jason drummed his fingers against a stack of chips and exchanged a look with the others. To them, the evening was becoming predictable. Winning had become easy. They wanted entertainment. What none of them realized was that the woman they had chosen for that entertainment had been watching every hand, every bluff, and every mistake they had made for years. And as the laughter around the table slowly grew louder, the first move in a game none of them understood had already begun. The room didn't know it yet, but the hunters were about to become the hunted. Jason Red loved an audience. Winning money was satisfying, but winning attention was what truly energized him. As another dealer pushed a mountain of chips toward his seat, he leaned back comfortably and allowed the admiration around the table to settle in. Marcus Kane laughed at one of Jason's stories while Trevor Scott checked the growing chip count in front of him. Ethan Brooks casually spun a single high-value chip across his knuckles. The atmosphere felt less like a competition and more like a private club for men who had spent years convincing themselves they were the smartest people in every room they entered. Emily Carter returned carrying a silver tray with fresh drinks. Her movements remained calm and professional. She placed each glass exactly where it belonged and quietly collected several empty ones. Most of the players ignored her completely. To them, she was simply part of the furniture, another employee moving through the casino's machinery. Jason watched her for several seconds before exchanging a glance with Marcus. The look alone was enough. Marcus immediately understood. The grin spreading across his face suggested that an idea had just become a shared joke. "Emily, right?" Jason called out loudly. Several nearby guests turned toward the table. Emily stopped and offered a polite smile. "Yes, sir." "You have worked here a long time, have you not?" Jason asked. "A few years." "Then you must know poker better than most people by now." The table chuckled. Emily simply shrugged. "I see a lot of games." Trevor laughed. "That is not an answer." "Maybe she studies us between drink orders," Ethan added. More laughter followed. Emily remained composed. She had heard similar comments before. Not from these players specifically, but from countless customers who assumed a uniform somehow measured intelligence. Jason tapped the felt table with one finger. "Tell me something. Which one of us is the easiest player to beat?" The question drew immediate interest from everyone nearby. Marcus laughed. Trevor pointed toward Ethan. Ethan pointed toward Marcus. The dealer lowered his eyes, sensing the conversation was heading somewhere uncomfortable. Emily hesitated briefly. "I could not say." "Come on," Jason insisted. "You watch us every week." "I am here to serve drinks, not judge players." "That sounds like a diplomatic answer," Marcus said. Translation, Trevor added, "She has no clue what she is watching." The table erupted again. Emily simply nodded and continued gathering glasses. The reaction only encouraged them. Jason enjoyed seeing people become uncomfortable. It was one of the reasons television audiences found him entertaining. He could make a room laugh while making someone else the target. "I have a better idea," Jason announced. His voice carried across the VIP room. Nearby players and spectators began paying attention. "Maybe Emily should sit in for a few hands." Several people laughed. Immediately, Ethan nearly choked on his drink. Marcus slapped the table. Trevor leaned forward with excitement. To them, the suggestion sounded ridiculous. To Jason, it sounded entertaining. To Emily, it sounded like the beginning of something entirely different. She remained standing quietly beside the table, her expression unchanged. But behind her calm eyes, she noticed every reaction. Every smile. Every assumption. Every careless display of confidence. And as the laughter continued to spread through the room, none of them realized they had already made the first mistake that would cost them far more than a few jokes before the night was over. The suggestion hung in the air for a moment before the entire table erupted with amusement. Jason Reed smiled broadly, clearly pleased with himself. Marcus Kane leaned back in his chair and laughed so hard he nearly knocked over a stack of chips. Trevor Scott wiped tears from the corners of his eyes while Ethan Brooks shook his head in disbelief. To them, the idea of a cocktail waitress sitting in a high-stakes poker game was the funniest thing they had heard all evening. Around the VIP room, several guests began paying attention. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. Curiosity spread from one table to another. Emily Carter stood quietly beside the players, still holding her silver tray. She neither encouraged the joke nor protested against it. Her calm reaction somehow made the situation even more entertaining for the men at the table. Jason gestured toward an empty seat. "Come on, Emily. We could all use a little excitement." More laughter followed. Emily offered a polite smile. "I should probably get back to work." "That sounds like fear," Marcus said. "I think she is worried about losing her tip money," Trevor added. Ethan grinned. "Maybe we should start a collection." The players laughed again. Even some spectators smiled awkwardly. The room was slowly transforming into an audience. Jason loved every second of it. "Tell you what," he said. "I will cover your buy-in myself." That statement immediately drew attention. Even among wealthy players, casually offering thousands of dollars was not common. Jason reached into his chip stack and slid several high-value chips toward the empty seat. No risk. No pressure. Just a friendly game. Emily glanced at the chips. The amount represented more money than many people earned in a week. Yet her expression did not change. Jason noticed. That surprised him slightly. Most people reacted to large stacks of chips. Most people could not hide it. Emily simply looked at them the same way she looked at a tray of glasses. Across the room, the dealer shifted uncomfortably. He had worked enough years in casinos to recognize when a joke was beginning to go too far. But nobody at the table seemed interested in stopping. The attention only encouraged them further. "What do you think?" Jason asked loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Maybe you can teach us professionals a thing or two." The sarcasm was obvious. Several guests laughed. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Emily remained silent for a few seconds. Then she carefully placed her tray on a nearby service station. The movement was simple. Ordinary. Yet something about it caused a subtle change in the room. The laughter became quieter. The smiles became less certain. Emily walked back toward the table and looked at the empty chair. Jason's grin widened. He believed he had won before the game even started. In his mind, the evening was about to become unforgettable entertainment. What he did not realize was that Emily had spent years listening rather than speaking. Years watching players reveal themselves through habits, emotions, and mistakes. She had learned that confidence often spoke louder than cards. And nobody at that table had been speaking more loudly than Jason Reed. Emily rested one hand lightly on the back of the chair and finally looked directly at him. "Are you sure?" she asked. The question sounded harmless. Almost polite. But something about it caused the dealer to pause. Jason laughed immediately. Marcus laughed with him. Trevor smirked. Ethan rolled his eyes. None of them noticed that several longtime casino employees had suddenly become very interested in what was happening. And as Emily slowly pulled out the chair and prepared to sit down, a strange hush began spreading through the room. The chair slid across the polished floor with a soft sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Emily Carter sat down without ceremony, smoothing the sleeves of her uniform before folding her hands in front of her. For a brief moment, nobody spoke. The VIP room felt different now. What had started as a joke was becoming an event. Guests drifted closer. Players at nearby tables paused their own games. Even a few casino employees found reasons to linger nearby. Jason Red welcomed the attention. He adjusted a stack of chips and flashed a confident smile toward the growing audience. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "it looks like we have a new challenger." Laughter rippled through the room. Marcus Kane raised his glass in mock celebration. Trevor Scott shook his head with amusement while Ethan Brooks leaned back comfortably, already expecting the outcome. Emily simply looked at the cards being shuffled. Her expression revealed nothing. The dealer cleared his throat. $100 small blind. $200 big blind. Jason glanced at Emily. "You know how blinds work, right?" The comment triggered another wave of laughter. Emily nodded politely. "I think I can keep up." Marcus smirked. "That is the confidence I like to hear." The first hand was dealt. Emily picked up her cards and studied them for only a second before placing them face down and folding immediately. Jason grinned. "Smart move." The next hand arrived. Again she folded. Then another. And another. The professionals became even more relaxed. Trevor started explaining basic poker concepts as though speaking to a beginner. Ethan pointed out obvious betting patterns with exaggerated patience. Jason occasionally glanced toward the audience, enjoying the role of teacher. Emily listened quietly. She thanked them for their advice. She never argued. She never challenged a single comment. To anyone watching, she appeared exactly as they expected. A nervous waitress trying to survive among experts. But something else was happening beneath the surface. While the players celebrated their own cleverness, Emily was studying them. Jason drummed his fingers. Whenever he felt strong. Marcus touched the edge of his watch before large bluffs. Trevor breathed through his nose more heavily whenever uncertainty entered his decisions. Ethan stared directly at opponents when he wanted them to fold. Small details. Tiny habits. The kind most people never noticed. Across the room, one of the casino supervisors watched with growing interest. Unlike the players, she was not paying attention to the cards. She was watching Emily's eyes. They never wandered. They never looked nervous. They moved calmly from player to player as if collecting information. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Emily lost a few small pots. Nothing dramatic. Nothing memorable. Exactly the kind of performance everyone expected. Jason became even more comfortable. His jokes grew louder. His bets became more aggressive. Every victory reinforced his belief that he was controlling the table. Yet the experienced dealer noticed something unusual. Emily never seemed disappointed when she folded. She never looked frustrated after losing chips. Most inexperienced players showed emotion. They chased losses. They tried to recover mistakes. Emily did neither. She appeared completely content to wait. Patiently. Quietly. Almost as if the money itself did not matter. Then a hand arrived. Emily looked at her cards for slightly longer than usual. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for the dealer to see. She placed a small bet into the center. Jason smiled immediately. Marcus leaned forward. Trevor exchanged a glance with Ethan. The waitress was finally playing. Around the table, anticipation returned. They believed the real entertainment was about to begin. None of them realized that for the past 30 minutes, Emily had not been learning how they played. She had been confirming what she already knew. And as the chips moved toward the center of the table, the first crack in their confidence began to form. The chips from the small pot slid toward Emily Carter. It was not a large win. In fact, most people watching barely reacted. Jason Reed certainly did not. He shrugged and stacked his own remaining chips with complete confidence. Marcus Kane dismissed the hand as beginner's luck. Trevor Scott smirked and whispered something that made Ethan Brooks laugh. The audience quickly returned to their conversations. To everyone except a few observant employees, nothing important had happened. Emily quietly organized her chips and waited for the next deal. Another hand arrived. This time she folded. Then she folded again. Her patience seemed endless. Jason continued winning small pots while entertaining the crowd with stories from tournament circuits and televised events. Every laugh reinforced his confidence. Every compliment fed his ego. He had spent years building an image of invincibility, and tonight felt no different. Then another hand found its way to Emily. She entered the pot again. Small bet. Calm expression. No hesitation. Jason immediately raised. Marcus followed. The tension around the table increased slightly. Emily studied the board, glanced briefly at Jason, and matched the bet. The dealer revealed another card. Jason became more aggressive. Marcus eventually folded. Emily remained. The room grew a little quieter. Jason smiled confidently. He had trapped hundreds of opponents before. He expected this hand to end exactly the same way. Yet when the final card appeared and the betting ended, Emily revealed a stronger hand. The pot moved in her direction. For the first time that evening, Jason's smile faded for half a second. It returned quickly, but the interruption had been noticeable. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Trevor stopped smiling. Ethan leaned forward. Nobody said much. They all knew two successful hands could still be coincidence. But coincidence had a way of becoming uncomfortable when it happened repeatedly. 20 minutes later, Emily won another pot. Then another. None of them were enormous. None of them felt dramatic. That was what made them unsettling. She was not taking reckless risks. She was not chasing impossible draws. She was simply making correct decisions over and over again. The dealer began noticing a pattern. So did the spectators. Emily rarely spoke. She rarely celebrated. When she won, she quietly stacked her chips and waited for the next hand. Her composure never changed. Jason, meanwhile, started talking less. Every time Emily entered a pot, his attention sharpened. He found himself watching her instead of the cards. It annoyed him. He could not explain why. Across the room, a veteran pit supervisor crossed his arms and continued observing. Unlike the crowd, he had spent decades around professional gamblers. He recognized discipline when he saw it. More importantly, he recognized the expression on Jason's face. It was the expression of a man encountering something unexpected. Not fear. Not yet. But doubt. Small. Growing. Dangerous. Then came another hand. Emily called a sizable bet without hesitation. Jason studied her carefully. No nervous movement. No excitement. No uncertainty. Nothing. The room seemed quieter than before. Even the soft sounds of slot machines felt distant. Jason drummed his fingers against the table, a habit Emily had noticed hours ago. The same habit that appeared whenever he believed he held a strong hand. Emily noticed it again and calmly matched his next raise. For the first time all night, Jason was no longer performing for the audience. He was focused entirely on the woman sitting across from him. And deep down, a question he did not want to ask had begun forming in his mind. What if this was not luck at all? The atmosphere inside the VIP room had changed completely. Earlier, people had been laughing. Now they were watching. Every seat around the table seemed occupied. Guests who had no involvement in the game lingered nearby, pretending to enjoy their drinks while secretly following every hand. The growing crowd sensed that something unusual was unfolding. Jason Reed felt it too. The difference was that he did not like it. For the first time that evening, he was no longer the center of the story. Emily Carter had quietly become the focus of the room. The dealer shuffled and dealt another hand. Jason examined his cards and felt a familiar rush of confidence. Finally. Something strong. He glanced around the table and immediately raised the bet. Marcus folded. Trevor folded. Ethan hesitated before folding as well. Only Emily remained. She studied her cards briefly before matching the raise. Nothing about her expression changed. Jason increased the pressure. Another raise. Emily called. The audience leaned closer. The dealer revealed the next cards. Jason felt even stronger. The board seemed perfect for his hand. He drummed his fingers against the felt, unaware that Emily noticed every movement. She had been noticing them all night. The same finger tap. The same slight lift of his chin. The same confidence that appeared whenever he believed he controlled the outcome. Jason pushed more chips forward. Emily matched him again. The room grew noticeably quieter. Nobody wanted to miss what happened next. Even Marcus and Trevor stopped making jokes. Something about Emily's calmness was becoming unsettling. Most players showed excitement when they held strong cards. Others revealed anxiety when facing pressure. Emily showed neither. She simply observed. Patiently. Like someone waiting for a train she already knew was arriving. Another card appeared. Jason barely glanced at it before increasing the bet once more. Emily looked at the board for several seconds. Then she looked directly at Jason. Not at his cards. Not at his chips. At him. The eye contact lasted only a moment, but Jason felt it. A strange discomfort settled into his stomach. For reasons he could not explain, he suddenly felt as though he was the one being studied. Emily matched the bet. Around the room, whispers began spreading among casino employees. Several recognized the look on her face. Not because they knew who she was, but because they recognized confidence when they saw it. Real confidence. The kind that never needed to announce itself. Jason attempted a smile. It felt forced. The final card appeared. The pot had grown significantly. Not enormous by professional standards, but large enough to matter. Jason pushed another stack of chips forward. "I hope you are enjoying your lesson," he said. A few nervous laughs came from the crowd. Emily looked at the chips. Then at Jason. Then back at the table. Finally, she quietly slid her own chips forward. The call came instantly. No hesitation. No uncertainty. The dealer prepared to reveal the winner. And for the first time all night, Jason Reed felt something he had not expected to feel when he invited a waitress to his table. He felt nervous. The dealer turned over the cards and reached for the pot. Jason Reed revealed his hand first, his confidence returning the moment the cards touched the felt. A few spectators nodded approvingly. It was a strong hand. Strong enough that Jason expected the outcome to restore the balance of the evening. He leaned back slightly and glanced toward Marcus Kane as if preparing to enjoy another victory. Then Emily Carter quietly placed her cards on the table. The reaction was immediate. The dealer froze for half a second before announcing the winner. The pot moved toward Emily. A hush settled over the room. Nobody gasped. Nobody shouted. The silence itself carried more weight than any reaction could have. Jason stared at the cards. Then at Emily. Then back at the cards. He replayed the hand in his mind, searching for a mistake. There had to be one. Yet every decision she made had been correct. Every call. Every pause. Every bet. Across the table, Emily simply stacked her chips and waited for the next hand. No smile. No celebration. No attempt to embarrass anyone. Somehow that made it worse. Marcus cleared his throat. Nice hand. The words sounded forced. Trevor Scott folded his arms. Ethan Brooks looked away. The dynamic of the table had shifted again. What had started as amusement was becoming uncertainty. The next few hands only deepened that feeling. Emily continued playing selectively. She entered fewer pots than anyone else. She folded often. She waited patiently. But whenever she chose to stay in a hand, the outcome seemed strangely predictable. More often than not, chips moved in her direction. The crowd noticed. The dealer noticed. Jason noticed most of all. Every professional player understood that luck could explain one win. Maybe two. But luck became harder to believe after an hour of consistent decisions. Jason stopped telling stories. He stopped making jokes. His attention narrowed entirely toward the woman sitting across from him. The more he studied her, the less he understood. She did not behave like an amateur. She did not chase losses. She did not force action. She never appeared emotional. She played with the discipline of someone who had spent years around the game. That realization irritated him. It also frightened him more than he wanted to admit. Another hand began. Jason looked down and found exactly the kind of cards he wanted. Premium cards. The sort that encouraged confidence. Across the table, Emily quietly examined her own hand. For several seconds neither player moved. Then Jason raised aggressively. Marcus folded immediately. Trevor folded. Ethan hesitated before stepping away. Once again, only Emily remained. The crowd pressed closer. People who had never met either player suddenly felt invested in the outcome. The dealer revealed the first community cards. Jason continued betting. Emily called. Another card appeared. Jason increased the pressure. Emily called again. The room felt almost motionless now. Nobody seemed interested in their drinks anymore. Nobody looked at their phones. Every eye remained fixed on the table. Jason could feel the tension building. He wanted to regain control. He wanted to remind everyone who he was. Instead, he found himself wondering something he never expected to ask. Not whether Emily could play. Not whether she understood poker. But whether she had been allowing him to believe he was in control from the very beginning. The next hand began with a tension that everyone in the room could feel. Nobody laughed anymore. Nobody made clever remarks. The earlier confidence had vanished from the table and been replaced by something much heavier. Anticipation. Jason Reed looked at his cards and felt a surge of relief. The kind of relief that came when the deck finally seemed to cooperate. Strong cards. The kind professionals waited for. The kind capable of changing momentum. Across from him, Emily Carter examined her own cards with the same calm expression she had worn all night. The dealer completed the opening round and the betting started immediately. Jason raised. Emily called. The crowd pressed closer. Another card appeared. Jason increased the pressure. Emily matched it without hesitation. A third card arrived. Once again Jason pushed more chips forward. Once again Emily calmly followed. Marcus Kane exchanged a worried glance with Trevor Scott. Ethan Brooks sat silently with his arms crossed. None of them could predict what was about to happen, but all of them sensed the importance of the moment. The pot continued growing. Thousands of dollars sat in the center of the table. More than enough to command everyone's attention. Jason looked directly at Emily. You know, most people would be nervous by now. Emily smiled politely. Maybe most people. The answer was simple. Respectful. Yet somehow it unsettled him more than an insult would have. The dealer revealed another card. Jason felt stronger than ever. Everything about the board suggested he was ahead. He pushed a significant stack of chips into the pot. Several spectators whispered. It was the largest bet anyone had made in nearly an hour. Emily studied the table quietly. The room became completely still. Even the dealer seemed careful not to move too quickly. Seconds passed. Then Emily matched the bet. No hesitation. No uncertainty. The reaction was immediate. People looked at one another. Marcus leaned forward. Trevor's eyes widened slightly. Jason felt a flash of irritation. He wanted her to fold. He wanted certainty. Instead, he received another calm call. The final card appeared. Jason stared at it. A slow smile returned to his face. At last. He believed the hand had ended exactly as he wanted. Without taking his eyes off Emily, he pushed nearly all of his remaining chips into the center. Gasps spread through the crowd. The bet was enormous. It represented a direct challenge. A declaration of confidence. Jason folded his hands and leaned back. The message was clear. If Emily wanted to continue, she would have to risk everything she had accumulated throughout the night. The room went silent. Emily looked at the chips. Then at Jason. Then at the board. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Finally she gathered her chips and slid them forward. The call came so smoothly it almost looked effortless. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The dealer swallowed hard and prepared for the reveal. Jason confidently turned over his cards. Several spectators nodded in approval. It was an excellent hand. A hand capable of defeating most opponents. For one brief second, Jason believed the nightmare was over. Then Emily quietly placed her cards on the table. And the expression on Jason Reed's face changed instantly. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The dealer looked down at the cards, then looked up again as if expecting them to change. They did not. The result remained the same. Emily Carter had won. The massive pot slowly moved across the felt toward her side of the table. The sound of chips sliding through the silence seemed louder than any applause could have been. Jason Reed remained motionless. His eyes stayed fixed on the table. The confidence that had filled the room earlier was gone. Around him, Marcus Kane stared in disbelief. Trevor Scott blinked repeatedly as though trying to process what he had just witnessed. Ethan Brooks looked away and exhaled slowly. The room had gone completely silent. Not because people were confused. Because they finally understood. This was never luck. Across the crowd, whispers began spreading. Questions turned into theories. Theories turned into recognition. Then a voice emerged from the back of the room. An older guest who had been watching quietly for most of the evening stepped forward. His expression carried the surprise of someone solving a puzzle. "Wait a second," he said. "I know who she is." Several heads turned. The man continued staring at Emily. "Years ago, before she disappeared from the circuit, I watched her play in Atlantic City." The silence deepened. Marcus frowned. Trevor looked confused. Jason slowly lifted his head. The guest shook his head in disbelief. Emily Carter was one of the sharpest tournament players I ever saw. She walked away at the height of her career. A murmur swept through the room. Suddenly everything made sense. The patience. The discipline. The calm decisions. The ability to read people. Emily simply sat quietly while the realization spread around her. She neither confirmed nor denied the story immediately. The crowd did that work for her. Jason stared at her as pieces finally connected in his mind. The entire evening replayed itself. Every hand. Every decision. Every moment he believed he was in control. He had not been teaching a waitress how to play poker. He had been challenging someone who understood the game far better than he did. Emily carefully organized the chips in front of her before finally standing from her chair. The crowd instinctively stepped aside. Nobody laughed now. Nobody made jokes. The respect in the room was unmistakable. Jason opened his mouth as though searching for something to say. An excuse. A question. An explanation. Nothing came. Emily picked up the tray she had set aside hours earlier. The simple gesture somehow carried more dignity than any victory celebration could have. Before turning away, she looked at Jason and offered a small, polite smile. "People usually tell you everything you need to know," she said softly. "You just have to listen instead of talking." No anger. No arrogance. No attempt to embarrass him. Just the truth. Jason lowered his eyes. The room remained silent. Emily then returned several chips to the table. Far more than anyone expected. "That was your buy-in," she said. "I believe it belongs to you." The gesture stunned the crowd more than the victory itself. She could have kept everything. Instead, she chose grace. Then she turned and walked toward the exit of the VIP room. The crowd parted naturally as she passed. Nobody stopped her. Nobody questioned her. They simply watched. Long after she disappeared beyond the glass doors, the silence remained. And that night, inside one of the most exclusive poker rooms in Las Vegas, a group of professionals learned a lesson far more valuable than any stack of chips. The easiest way to lose is to assume you already know who is sitting across from you.